All right. Officially recording, I hope. So we're gonna start. And for Erin, hi Erin. Hope you love this. Okay. So yes, we were talking about luxury goods and trade, and the one thing about this unit, even though for whatever reason students do not do the best on it, is it's really a lot about trading interactions with environment and economic interactions, and we'll get into politics at the end. So luxury goods, this is going to be a big deal. This is why we have people like Marco Polo going to find the spice, and then eventually ending with people trying to find their own routes to get those luxury goods. So knowing what luxury goods are, I think we kind of talked about that. Silk, cotton textiles, porcelain, spices, precious metals, gems, slaves, exotic animals. So just quickly, where does silk come from? China. Cotton textiles. Oh boy. Egypt and India, right? Middle East is where most of the cotton textiles, Egypt and India. Porcelain, don't die. Johnny, please. Porcelain. China. And even Korea has some porcelain too, but mostly, yes. China is a big producer of porcelain. Spices, tricky. And Southeast Asia. Yeah, India is going to be the primary location to get those spices, and Southeast Asia. Precious metals and gems. 25% of the world's wealth, all the world's diamonds at one point were here. China. South America. Y'all didn't listen to your Indian video that India. Yes. They had almost all of the found gems during this time period. Rubies, emeralds. Do you remember the Mughal dynasty when he built his peacock throne, Shah Jahan? And it was the most beautiful. And where is the largest diamond in the world supposed to be from? India, the one that was on the Titanic and all that stuff. You know that story? No. Yeah, no. That is okay. The bridge is all right. Well, now you do. Yeah, right. The shape of the shape, the heart, and all that stuff. Yes. I have the name. The biggest diamond was found there. And a lot of people stole those diamonds and gems off the Taj Mahal and the Peacock Throne, and a lot of it because they put them, embedded them in the walls. Okay? So, slaves only in Africa? No, because yesterday we learned about the Romans. Hanseatic League, remember? And we were talking about how the Vikings were Slavic slaves were being traded through the Hanseatic League as well. But definitely African and white slaves in Northern Europe and Russia. Most of the exotic animals that people wanted came from Africa, right? Just think of Jung He and his zoo and the little giraffe that they brought over. Okay, so one of the things I was ending with was the example of caravan organization. Now keep in mind, not a caravan. We assume that you know a caravan is a group of people traveling in large masses with animals, carts, moving. But the idea that now people are starting to make a business out of this and get ready to host caravans. Which is that. Okay, what Camilla's saying, those little stops, oasis towns, are known as caravanserais. Or I can't even say that right, caravanserais. Which basically you would stop with your caravan, and if you needed more food or lodging or animals, whatever the case is, people would meet up there, open up their homes, open up, quote, inns, places that you can get a place to sleep or get food, but also exchange ideas and things like that. A lot of times we, kind of like a complex understanding point of like a conference center where you can meet with people, get a bite to eat, etc. And then, of course, examples of new forms of credit and monetization, okay? Credit meaning paying and saying, well, promissory note that I'll pay you later, or I'll pay payments of installments. But monetization, what is that? We talked about that a little bit yesterday.
Having
What? Not just money.
like a set currency.
Like a set currency, minted, right? That you have a treasurer that will go and make sure to standardize the money to make sure that there is not devaluation of the coins or the metals in the coins, having them minted with a stamp of whoever's the ruler or something that makes it clear that it came from there.
So this is like the end of barter.
Yes, yeah. Well, and we've ended bartering. Really, time period 1 really does it, because you start with traditional, basic using money. Like the Qin had coins. If you had to ask like which one actually starts using money, the Chinese used to rope their little coins on string, and the Qin actually is the first. I think if you go back and look at chapter 2, that actually has coins first. Okay, so we have money in period 2, but now this idea that it's standardized and that everybody, there's no counterfeit. It's harder to counterfeit, and that's one of the reasons as well that they go to paper money, right? The Tang dynasty, and I believe even the Yuan dabbled a little bit in the Mongols and that. So we're going to see a lot more of that because it can be controlled better, and the people, how much everybody's getting. And it's cheaper, obviously, to do that. So bills of exchange, credit checks, and banking houses. All of affiliated with just one society from the Middle Ages. Islamic. Dar al-Islam, okay? Dar al-Islam, when those Islamic merchants start going all over the Indian Ocean and all over, and I say Dar al-Islam because that means what? House of Wisdom, or House of, not Islam, of Islam. Any place that is influenced by Islam is going to be majority Islamic conversion. So you can look at maps. It'd be good for you to look at a map to show Dar al-Islam during the Middle Ages so you see how extensive the reach of Islam will become. So, of course, people are going to be dealing with money a lot because one of the big things that is revered in Islamic religion is merchants. Muhammad was a merchant, his wife was a merchant, and so having business transactions and making money and approving the making of money is going to be big, and so having different ways to pay and do business will create monetization and businesses for money. Okay, sticking with this, because trade is such a big deal during this time, the states start to practice things that support trade and organize trading better. This is why also in the Middle Ages we get guilds. Guilds start to pop up all over, whether it's India, Byzantine Empire, and even later the Western European. What is a guild and what's its purpose?
It's like a bunch of people who all have like the same trade.
Right?
And they get together and decide like prices and regulations.
Right, and the output, and they train apprentices and stuff like that. Yeah, so wages, prices, costs, how much you're going to make. And it's like a small union, but without the union. And so, but it's all in the same type of craft. So they do that, and you see these because that's part of that trading organization. That's part of state practices. So you get state-sponsored commercial infrastructures because they're expensive, right? Doing all this takes a lot of money. So one of the earliest examples in China would be the building of the Grand Canal. Why did they need the Grand Canal? What was the purpose?
To connect the north and south.
Why?
Because all the rivers
Right? And what did we need to get that the north had and the south? Why there need to be a connection? What did they have? Because they have a huge population. Rice to the north and wheat to the south, right? Wheat growing north, rice growing south, and so that would allow them to get food to their population faster. So, which dynasty? Next question. Yes, Sway. S-U-I.
That's literally the only thing I remember.
Right there, contextualization.
I literally remember this paragraph in the chapter, like
about the Grand Canal. It's like it literally is like a gold section
over and over in my head.
Okay, so now let's do a pause. We'll actually do it in a minute when we get to the pause. But yes, the Sui dynasty, the Grand Canal. It's a tiny dynasty, but that's important. So you have that. But other things, we already talked about minting of coins, use of paper money. Okay, so when you think of the first major coin that was most valuable, hopefully you'll think about this coin from this time period. It was probably the most valuable coin ever made, arguably, and it came from this time period from which empire? Yes, the Byzantine Empire, the Byzant, B-E-Z-A-N-T, which was almost solid gold. So when you think about minting of coins, you should be drawn to using that as your example. And of course, we already said when you think about paper money, you should be thinking about Tong China and China having flying cash, right? That's what they call it, paper money. Examples of trading organizations, we already talked about guilds, but also the Hanseatic League, the organization of those Scandinavian, London to Novgorod, Vikings, Mongols, Byzantine trading associations that were dealing with the trade at the time. And we already talked about the banks and credit, etc. Okay, so the expansion of empires facilitated this trade and communication, conquering economies. So you are required, in red, to know examples of this, and not just examples of economics, but examples of everything. So we go back to creating spec charts, remember, social, political, economic, cultural. Just think, again, we would be doing music videos on these. Just think of that. Everything you had to do for your music video, you want to get your little study group. Can I identify social, political, economic, and cultural details for each of these? So China's hard because there's empires, right? Sui is first.
Sui reunited China.
What's next?
Tong.
Tong. Okay, Tong, why is it significant if you had to remember anything about it?
Civil service examination.
Okay, that's a big thing. What
Golden
else?
Age of poetry.
Good. Song too. Tong and Song are golden age. Song more so, but why? What else? The what? Tributary, lots of tributes with Vietnam and North Korea.
This is Tang.
Tang, Tong. Yes.
Equal land
Good.
distribution.
What?
Equal land distribution?
Yes, the equal land distribution by Empress, the first woman.
Empress Wu.
Empress Wu. Okay, and then of course Empress Wu, what got her in trouble was that she liked this philosophy, religion a lot, and others did not. Buddhism, all of those big Buddhas were built during this time. Okay, so and then the other thing is it is the largest geographically. If you look on the map, it encompassed the largest. It was the biggest Chinese empire during any time period, okay? So Tang is the largest. So lots of things going on with the Tang dynasty. Then after Tang, we have the Song, which basically is smaller. Didn't care as much about military, got into trouble. Oh, by the way, the Tang also expanded the Great Wall of China, just FYI. The Song dynasty was like, yeah, we don't really like war that much. What do we care about? Technology. Intelligence and technology, innovations. They actually have a really big production of industry, almost to industrial levels, output of iron and iron production. They like philosophy. They like culture. You know, they were more philosophical. Neo-Confucianism was big. Foot binding was big. The printing press, like literally press, not necessarily like the one Gutenberg, but lots of prints. So very artistic. That's why I was saying when Johnny mentioned that Song really is more known for the artistic qualities, and that's kind of gets them in trouble because knock knock, who's at your door? Mongols, right?
The Crash Course Cutaway.
Oh yeah, the Japanese history of Japan. Doesn't he do that? Knock knock. You know that the one that has the R-rated Japanese history. But yeah, so the Mongols come in and they're just like, okay, we're gonna pretend we're Chinese. What do they call themselves?
Yuan.
Yuan. And Kublai Khan stays there, hangs out for a while. We have the Yuan dynasty, and then the very end of this time period, and it picks us up. We actually started with this when you came to me. What's the last dynasty on the end? The Ming, which straddles time period 3 and 4. Okay, so lots of Chinese dynasties. If you're like, oh my gosh, I hate China, I'm dying, I'm having an ulcer right now, chapter 13 is your friend, okay? China is in chapter 13.
Wait, so where did the nomadic Jurchen people come from?
They come from up north, and they're dealt with during this period too. Not to be confused with Manchurians, because a lot of people do all the time, but they're one of the ones after the Xiongnu that cause a lot of the angst and anxiety during this time period as well. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
What did the Ming do?
We're not there yet because they're really on the next dynasty.
Okay.
But name one thing. Okay, this is actually good. So in the early Ming dynasty, remember they hated the Mongols. They eradicated anything that was Mongol. They start building the Forbidden City, right? And then they changed their mind and they started acting differently than they were at the beginning. So probably the last Ming thing that kind of straddles is Cheng He's expeditions. We talked about Gavin Menzies. Hello, Gavin. So that's where we come in with the Ming. All right, then the Byzantine Empire. Okay, so really, the Byzantine Empire didn't call themselves Byzantines.
But everybody else.
They called it, well, the historians have, but what would a Byzantine person call themselves? A Roman. I'm a Roman, because that is what is left of the Roman Empire.
I mean, they're not wrong.
They never would have called themselves Byzantines. That is definitely a historical nomenclature that has come to them later, but they are what's left of that. So this is confusing though, because you start learning about the Byzantine and what is distinctly Byzantine culture. Constantine's not really their emperor you want to put there as a Byzantine ruler, because Justinian is the one you should think of. Constantine's in that still kind of fall of Rome, we're not dead yet. Constantine establishes Constantinople and establishes the seat of government there, but for the most part, Constantine is still in your Roman Empire era, okay? We talked about him being famous for adapting Christianity, not making it official, because Theodosius was the one who made it official. All those people that are still Roman Empire. The first person that should come to your mind and you should be able to recollect with Byzantine is Justinian and Theodora. Okay, so when you're doing your little VIP. Your book puts them in a later chapter. Byzantine Empire history is chapter 19, where it will go over all of the details about the Byzantine Empire. It's the late Middle Ages that it groups it with, because Europe is split up into 2 chapters. I don't know if y'all remember that. They do like early Middle Ages in chapter 16, and then they do late Middle Ages in chapter 19. The other thing with the Byzantine Empire that you need to write down in your notes is it introduces Russia, true Russia, for the first time with the rise of the czars and kind of kicking the Golden Horde out in chapter 19 as well. So we see the term czar, Ivan the Terrible, Ivan the Great, basically the Kievan Russians, and explaining that. And that makes sense. Why would they put the Byzantines and Russians together?
Because they both use the
Orthodox Christianity, right? Because we have the 1054 schism and the first real denomination branch off from Roman Catholicism. So if you look and you need that early Russian and Byzantine Empire history, they are put together in your book. Okay, so going back to Justinian before we leave it alone, what are some things that you know? Chapters 19.
It's like standardized.
Yeah, well,
Okay, law, Justinian Code of Law, where he put all the things great about Greco-Roman into one compilation, the Justinian Code of Law.
she had a wife.
Theodora,
She did something.
she did lots of things. Theodora, she was not from Egypt. She had a controversial past. His parents and uncle and aunt did not want him to marry her.
Is it
Well, in more softer versions, they call her a circus performer. She was a burlesque performer, didn't wear a lot of clothes when she did her thing. Her dad was a bear trainer. That's why a lot of people will call her the circus trainer. Very beautiful, intriguing, caught his eye at a young age, and they're like, no. But he was like, yes. She ended up being actually pretty powerful whenever she became, probably some would argue more powerful than he was. She did a lot of the ruling from behind the scenes. And so a lot of the laws and implementation of laws, and she did a lot for women's rights early on. So a lot of people hated her, clearly, because of her past and because of what she did. The other thing about Justinian is that he expanded the Byzantine Empire. He was big on conquest, so probably the height of the Byzantine Empire was under him. A lot of the major architectural developments, y'all remember hearing about the Hippodrome? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The chariot racing that was meant to look like Circus Maximus in Rome. And then he also had, I think it was the Mess, which was the big street that was supposed to be like a forum. There's one other thing about him that I'm forgetting to tell y'all that's good. I guess that's it. He had a big complex, the Hagia Sophia. Hello, that's what it is. I know there's something maybe I'm forgetting. He built our commission, the Hagia Sophia, which is still around, as you know, when the Ottomans came in, they wouldn't tear it down, they turned it into a mosque. So lots of good things with Justinian, and of course the Orthodox Christianity coming after him later in the dynasty to create orthodoxy. And here's a term, Caesaropapism, one of my favorite ones. He's affiliated with Caesar, and the Byzantine emperors are associated with Caesaropapism. So Caesaropapism, all one word. Just think of it when you look at it. Caesaropapism.
It's Caesar over Pope. So
Right?
Caesar over the church.
So,
the Pope or the Saint?
yes, right? The ruler is in charge of the religion, which is a big component of orthodoxy, right? They don't have a pope because the Caesar is the pope. So they have patriarchs in the Orthodox religion, and they have a holy synod council that makes decisions. So that is one of the other distinctive things when you look at Roman Catholicism and the Pope being the highest. Where in Orthodoxy, they create Caesaropapism, which means ultimately the Caesar would have the final say. Caliphates, thank goodness we don't have to know all of them because there's definitely more than two. You do have to know the two major ones. Which one comes first? Umayyad, and then the Abbasid is second. Okay, so understanding those caliphates and what they did will be important. So real quickly, Umayyad, because they were first. What do we know about them?
They expanded.
They were in like
Her capital was where? Damascus. Okay, it's Syria. Okay, so their capital was in Damascus. What are some of the things they were known for? What do you remember about them? Yes,
Well, they
Molly?
made Arabic the official language.
Yep.
They had standard money, and they encouraged people to convert to Islam and those who didn't how to pay tax.
Yes, the jizya tax kind of makes its debut under them. And they do have standardized coins, and Arabic promoted that. How did they treat people who wanted to govern in their country? Not great, right? That was kind of the reason the Abbasids are able to come in. They were kind of exclusive. They didn't really like to use the people in the lands that they were ruling, and so they got credit for not really being as tolerant. And so the Abbasid kind of like, that's how they campaigned, that they would spread that wealth kind of like the Persians did. And so they get booted. Where do the Umayyads get booted to? Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, and where they'll prosper and continue to grow. So the Islamic Spain, Iberian Peninsula is Umayyad. And then the Abbasid come in. I already gave you a hint. They're going to be more tolerant. They're going to be like, okay, if you know how to rule, we'll let you. We'll use more of the Arabs in the region. They don't necessarily have to be. I think it's like Malawi people are kind of like the people of the indigenous that start to rule. But what other good things or great things do you never remember about Abbasid?
There are it's around saying like a really spectacular capital.
Yeah, Baghdad. Baghdad, under Harun al-Rashid, the House of Wisdom, where most of the major scholarship, all of the rewriting of the Greek philosophies and the math and science from the Arab and Indian world. They collect a lot of that knowledge and house it during the Middle Ages so that later the Renaissance and can come back to Europe. So most of the manuscript writing and keeping of all of those books in libraries take place during this time period. So they're very scholarly. It's Harun al-Rashid who supposedly traded presents with Charlemagne. And I think Charlemagne supposedly gave him a white elephant or something like that. One of them gave an elephant to each other.
So how the game got
Yeah, I was gonna say
originated?
they had a white elephant.
They do have white. That's where the game originates. It really does. Okay, so Caliphates, chapter 15. Chapter 15, if you need to touch up. Okay, Islam. So some kids have a hard time after Muhammad. The period between Muhammad and the Caliphates confuses a lot of people about Abu Bakr and what happens because he doesn't have a clear successor. The whole Sunni Shiite split and what that means. If you don't remember that well, read chapter 15 because it covers that early part before it gets into the Caliphates. And I feel like a lot of the times students need a little refresher. It's like they know Muhammad, they know who, what, when, where. They know the basics of the religion. And then when it gets to the messy part of the Sunni Shiite split, the Sufi, the kind of the branches, getting to the Caliphates is kind of messy. So make sure that you touch that up. Then my personal favorite, the Mongols, right? Why are Mongols great?
Because they conquer people. And
But not
they
just conquer.
facilitate trade because
There's big facilitation of trade in the Silk Roads with their passports and using different types of methods to get people across the Silk Road. What else?
They allowed China to they didn't want them to adopt Mongol culture, so they didn't want them to take their language or anything.
Right, but they adapted almost all the
But they
Chinese
adapted
culture,
Chinese.
right? So in China they have those. Are they only influential in China?
No.
No.
China, Russia, and Persia.
And the Central Asia, right? So we'll get into the four Khanates, but you're skipping over my favorite person in the Mongol
Genghis
Empire.
Khan.
Yes, why is he so important? He's arguably the best ruler ever.
military.
He unified all the nomads, right? Hello, Genghis. Unified all of the nomads, and till this day, it is the largest land empire that has ever been created. Okay? So that is why they are awesome. He is awesome. Of course, when he died, couldn't keep it together, and we have the four Khanates. So now you can tell me, we know, one, I think Anya said, the Golden Horde becomes the Russian territories. That's one. What are the other three? Yuan, or the Great Khan's region, which is Kublai Khan, right? So Yuan dynasty, the Khan of the Great Khan, or Ilkhanate of the Great Khan in China. There's two more.
We're coming to Persia.
What's the Persian one called? The Ilkhanate, right? The Ilkhanate of Persia, so that's going to be where the Safavid and Ottoman. Chapter 17,
We literally never.
okay? And then one more, right in the middle.
Oh,
Good
Okay,
call,
what
just
is it?
flat out.
Sounds like a tea.
Tamerlane?
Chagtai. I don't know why that was such a name. Chai tea, that's what it makes me think of.
Oh.
Chagtai is the name of it in the middle, and that's where the Central Asia, Mongolia would be today. Okay, page for you, Camilla, with the map. Chapter 17 starts on 363. I think 372 has the map of all of the
I remember
Khanates.
reading primary source.
Yes, page 372. 372 has a wonderful map of all of them labeled and in color, so y'all can look at that. The other thing about chapter 17, because most people remember the Mongols, what you don't remember is the Turks. They're not the same. And chapter 17, the other half of chapter 17 talks about their originations of the Turks, which are important because they will become the Safavid and Ottoman dynasties, right? So knowing the differences and similarities between the Turk nomads and the Mongol nomads, and even within those groups, they pretend they're together, like good old Tamerlane. You know, remember learning about Tamerlane? Timur the Lame? T-I-M-U-R? All right, Camilla remembers him. Who is he? Because he's in this chapter.
Well, I remember his name.
Okay, good. What do we remember?
Is he the one
Molly.
who destroyed the Indian Sultan?
Yeah,
Like,
he
really
basically destroyed. He's a conqueror. He's conquest. He claims to be a descendant of the Mongols, but he's really not. He's more Turkish more than anything. But he's one of the last race nomads that is a conqueror. He builds the Blue Mosque. He has it set up in Central Asia. So once again, knowing the details about how those people evolve into what we know as the Ottomans, and of course the Mongols just continue to be Central Asian nomadic group. Chapter 17 is your nomad know-it-all. Do the learn smart. See how much you remember. Nomads are pretty simple, straightforward. Okay, so movement of peoples cause environmental and linguistic effects. Which spice letter is this slide going to be about? I and culture, right? The linguistic effects. So lots of I, interaction with human environment.
There's no E.
All right, so let me give you a minute to read and highlight, and you tell me words like you're like, nope, don't remember learning about that.
The Vikings. Oh boy.
No Vikings? What?
Yeah, I remember long ships, but that's
I remember the Polynesian.
With, like,
Yay!
Weren't the
Most people don't.
Polynesians the ones who?
They were like Australia or something, right?
Yeah,
No, Polynesia's like Hawaii and Samoa and
I
Fiji.
remember spending
Same
time on
region.
burgers.
It is Oceania, the region that we never talk about.
Wait,
that's
Moana, right?
Yeah.
What's what?
Polynesia.
Oh,
Moana. Yes, Moana. Absolutely,
I
Moana.
was listening to Moana soundtrack last night.
Okay, so first and foremost, Vikings, chapter 16. Vikings, chapter 16. Not a hard reread because there's only like maybe 1 or 2 gold sections on them, real quick for you to review in your book. But yes, knowing the main thing about the Viking Scandinavian way of life is that they were not just conquerors and bullies that went around burning villages and stealing things, but like you said, they traded with their long ships. You should have learned in middle school, they were the first to America,
Leif Erikson.
right? Leif Erikson.
Leif
What about Gavin? Okay, so yeah, Leif Erikson and Greenland and Iceland and Newfoundland. So they're explorers, they're traders, they're raiders. I already told you yesterday they're big in the Hanseatic Trade League. Okay, they're providing goods. They're not just being big bullies, although they are big bullies still. We got the barbarian aspect. Nomadic, they're herders. Most people forget that. They're pastoralists. What kind of animal are we're herding?
I'm sorry, where are we?
We're not hurting
Vikings.
animals.
Okay. Yes, we're herding. What are the Vikings herding?
I'm gonna guess goats.
No. Let's go with reindeer. Okay.
Oh,
No.
Remember, part of the group, the Offshore, the Lapps in Scandinavia, so they do have animals. Not so much, but there are Vikings that are herders. But they have a lot of things, and they're scary. They scare people.
And were the hats a
The
real
hats.
thing? Were those
Yes,
real?
they were a real
That's so
thing
cool.
because they wanted, and even their ships were made to look like dragons. That's why people
Yeah.
think they see Loch Ness monsters because they would come out of the fog from the river, and you just see this big monster head coming at you because their ships were like
Let's
super
have a Viking
intricate.
party on Tuesday.
They also were known for their burials. Remember, they would set the people on fire and send them off into the sea. The other thing sometimes they would do, like the Chinese, like the Egyptians, is bury them with all of their friends and animals, and they believe you took your stuff to the afterlife too, which was not really cool if you had to die.
What happened if there was just like a group of Vikings just like on the water and they just see a boat coming?
Well, they would know they were Vikings though, because they would have the similar ships. It was mainly how they scared the other territories into submission during the Dark Ages. Yeah. Okay, so what about anything else? Vikings. What else?
Do they have like the burning
Is that
boat thing?
monastery?
Is that the
Yes.
same thing? Yeah.
Yes. Which one?
Attack monasteries and stuff.
Yes. Monasteries would be burned down to steal all the goods. Yes.
Like the Vikings is where the Normans and France and willing to conquer.
Yes. Yes. The early Normans and what will become England. Okay, Berbers. Let's go on. Everybody know them?
Oh, they were the ones who went to Africa.
Yes. Northern African nomads. Islamic. Later Islamic, right? So Berbers are affiliated with North Africa. Eventually, and a lot of the caliphates in Africa, we don't really talk about them, but they're going to be the Islamic Caribbean Africa. So the way the Arabs and Berbers adapted, so Arab and Berbers, notice it doesn't say Islamic or Muslim, but early on, even before Islam comes, the Arabs and Berbers will be the ones to adapt the camel to the Saharan region, bring them over from Asia, bring them over from Central Asia, and use them as draft animals to get people across the Sahara. And then, of course, we already talked about Central Asian pastoral groups using horses. That's all chapter 17. Yeah, and the Turks. Mongols and Turks. Okay, so migrations required in red that you know these, which we've already talked about. Bantu don't go away for a long time. They've been with us since period 1. So making sure that you remember that they bring their language and facilitate the transmission of iron and agriculture. Yes, they're still moving. Remember, it's like 1,000-year migration. And you can look it up on the chapter that has to deal with that. I think it's like Africa 18 picks up the Bantu again. I'll talk about them in the beginning. So they're coming. What's their agricultural practice called again? Slash and burn. They're bringing those bananas. And then Camilla remembers reading about Polynesian peoples and their own cultivation of foods and domestication of animals, bringing all those little pigs with them in their boats. Moana, did she have her little pig?
Yeah.
Was it
Potatoes,
potatoes?
sweet potatoes.
Sweet potatoes.
Yeah, they have yams and sweet potatoes.
I hate sweet potatoes.
And so they have their own little cultivation in their little boats going from island to island. Chapter 20. I love chapter 20, first of all. because it puts your two least favorite things together, meaning the two things you forget the most.
Polynesian.
Americas and Oceania. All
You mean the two
together
best
in
regions?
one. That's right.
You-
So the good thing about relearning this is all in chapter 20. You can refresh your memory on early America. It will bring you up to Aztec and Inca, but also Polynesia, early Hawaii, early Samoa, a lot about the Polynesian people at the end of the chapter.
Can I go about
Yes. Okay, so you got that, coming of that, nomadic foragers in Australia, Pacific Island societies, all of that's in chapter 20. Bold words, you'll be like, oh, Hawaiian temple, oh, what this and that, I didn't remember that. So once again, before you reread chapter 20, do the Learn Smart, see if you know anything, and then decide, oh yeah, I need to go read that, or look at that chapter. Okay, so the language part, the cultural part, some of these migrations lead to diffusion of languages. We know this, Bantu. Okay, and diffusion in creating new languages. Swahili is a very good specific example. Swahili is the mix of Bantu and Arabic. Islamic language.
The Islamic language.
Right, which is Arabic. Okay, and then of course the spread of Turkic language and the meshing of the Arabic and Turkish language to produce what we will have in Middle Eastern dialects as we go into those Ottoman and Safavid and Turkish language evolving. The Turkish language evolving out of Arabic. And too bad Aaron's not here. Isn't he our representative of Turkey? He's not even here.
Well, you'll have Darren next period.
And then we love the letter E and C, religion and culture, and religion and trade. Why not use religion to sell your stuff, right? That's what Muslim early merchants will do. Spread religion and make money. So as I already mentioned, a lot of that early stuff after the Prophet Muhammad, all of that early Arabian Peninsula information, bless you, is in the beginning of chapter 15. So the early beliefs and practices, if you need a touch up on who, what, when, where, what do they believe, 5 pillars of faith, those kind of things. Fasting, all of that stuff there, and how people talk about how it reflects all the major religions before it. It takes from Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Judaism, all of it melded together into one belief, and then of course, what do they believe that those don't to make it Islam. Very syncretic in nature. It is the last of the major religions. They always try to trick you guys with questions like, what was the only religion not to come out of time period 1 and 2? And you would say, Islam, because it's 622 CE. So it's the only one that does not come out of that foundational. It's period 1 and 2. And how it spreads is significantly different than the other ones. Okay, the military conquest for sure. Okay, using military conquest early on for expansion, and then of course merchants and missionary are similar to other things we've learned, but it's that military conquest that makes Islam a distinctively different proselytizing religion, because they build on the need of the Bedouin societies where it originates to want to conquer, to want to keep up with that lifestyle. They use the Bedouins to go into regions that weren't traditionally Islam to gain influence and then either have the people convert or eventually pay the jizya tax, right? So this is where Islam gets the stereotype for being violent, right? Because of all the virgins promised in heaven if you murder this many people, and the jihad term comes out of this because of that early conquest. But not all of them, none of this for the most part will be taken on in every place, but it does have that expansion. What were those local Arabian people called? What they had a name? The nomads.
Arab.
No. The ones that will convert to Islam first.
Oh.
Bedouins.
Oh.
Bedouins. Bedouins, Bedouin Society. They're going to be your first converts. And then, of course, my favorite, because we live in Houston, diaspora communities, because we have plenty of diaspora communities in Houston. Just drive down Bel Air Boulevard, start at the Med Center, and work your way to Highway 6. The street signs will change in names quite a few times. I know, right? Take a little trip, little diaspora community. So basically what happens in this time period is people will move but take their own cultural traditions with them and set up little neighborhoods, little Chinatowns, little Italys, little this or that. So the examples that you should know are the ones on the screen, knowing that Muslim merchants went to the Indian Ocean regions. They would build mosques, they would set up Islamic communities as they went throughout there. All of Darul Islam, so that they could practice prayer and, do things, building. We already know Chinese merchant communities in Southeast Asia. What were those people called? First hot seat ever this year.
Malacca.
Well, that was where they were, but what were those Chinese little groups called in those regions? What was the name of the Chinese people who migrated to that region and set up shop as merchants? And Ayutthaya and Malacca and Cambodia. You don't remember the
Yeah,
name?
what's it start with?
An H.
Oh, I feel like
What? Hokkien. 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 Who was the question leader for that one? Shame on you.
Is it a hot seat or a
Okay.
fishbowl?
Oh, it was a hot seat. It was our first hot seat. I think it was. I don't think it was a fishbowl.
No,
It was a fishbowl because each group went in the middle. The Ayutthaya people and then that. So yes, you're right. It was a fishbowl. Hokkien. And then the Baba Society, Baba Black Sheep in that little article. So yes, having those Chinese communities in Southeast Asia. And then the Jewish communities, they're everywhere. Mediterranean, Indian, everywhere the Jews go, they take their community with them and set up shop. So having those. Okay, so complex connection. So like if you wanted really good bubble tea or dumplings, where would you go in Houston to get that?
Chinatown.
And where is Chinatown?
Bel Air.
Down Bel Air. Yeah, straight past St. Agnes and St. Jesuit, Beltway 8. Go that direction. You're getting close. Okay. So, but here's the trick. So you're driving back this way down Bel Air. You pass Jake and Jesuit. You're getting to Gessner, and you hopefully stop at Red Circle for some churros and ice cream, and you keep going, and then you get to Madrid and Bel Air, and oh my goodness, Plaza de Americas. Where are we now? Latin American diaspora communities all the way to almost Chimney Rock.
No, but then you go through there's like a little Indian village.
That's on Harwin. That's
God,
wrong street.
My mom
wrong
be
street.
so disappointed.
No problem. But yes, you get the picture. We definitely have diasporic communities all over Houston. That's what makes us so awesome.
There's one part where like all the street signs are
Yeah.
like in like Chinese.
Oh, and then in Harwin too, they have Indian sign streets as well. Yes, you've got the street signs.
Also, you go to the courthouse.
Okay.
Can we
I've
actually
got-
use that as synthesis?
Yes, yes. Did you hear, Anya? Can we actually use that as synthesis? You better believe it if you're talking about diasporic communities and migrations. Yes. Okay. So we only have 4 minutes.
They'll know where
Stay
you're
with me
from.
so we don't get behind. Writings. We're getting into culture. You have to know these two. Please tell me you remember these two men. Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo.
Yes.
Ibn Battuta.
He was in the Middle East, right?
He is a Muslim who was from Fez, Morocco. He was a judge. He went a lot of places, like 100 hajjs and pilgrimages. He worked for the Delhi of Sultanate, did a little work in India, but he was an Islamic judge, and everywhere he went, he wrote down things. Was he partial or impartial in his writing?
Partial.
He was partial, right? Because he was biased. He was like, oh my gosh, they don't have any shirts on. What
Oh,
kind of Muslim are you, ladies of Africa, walking around nude? You know, so he had a lot to say about people, and he like praised people he thought was great, and he would say bad things about people who didn't. He did. Same Marco Polo was kind of the same. Polo was a little bit like, this is weird, this is, don't eat this kind of stuff. But these men, writing down these things, created what for the rest of the world at the time?
Knowledge about like another
Other places, like it says, both the extent and limitations of intercultural knowledge and understanding, like biases versus not biases, but creating to create our curiosity to want to go out and see what was out there. There's another guy, you probably don't remember, Ibn Sama, who was a Nestorian missionary who also wrote things. Yeah, I don't expect you to remember them. These guys are highlighted in chapter 21. That's another mental map chapter, by the way, chapter 21. Okay, some more culture. Please tell me you know most of this. We don't have to spend too much time. Maybe the bottom. The bottom may get you caught up a little bit. The top, I would hope that you remember most of those diffusions in art and cultural. So what you want to ask yourself about the top are what are specific examples of literature, art, or culture, other culture affiliated with Neo-Confucianism and Buddhism. What would you see in Southeast Asia to know it had Hindu and Buddhist influence? You know, think of visual things. On your next set of PowerPoints I'm going to send you, I'm sending you a visual like review to see if you can recognize. So thinking about this. So as you look at this list, what are some visual things you remember about those literary, artistic, and cultural things coming together?
Machu Picchu.
What? Machu Picchu for the Inca, right? So the big building or terrace village up in the top. What else?
Weren't there paintings
For which one?
for the Islam where there was like I remember.
But in regard to these regions.
Yeah.
So which region are you talking about? Southeast Asian doesn't have a lot of big paintings, yeah.
Like Africa, they built Islamic temples that are
Yeah,
like
coral reefs
Yeah, I
or
thought that was
sand,
so cool.
right? Okay, so in Africa you have that influence in Africa. What would you see in Southeast Asia to know it was Hindu or Buddhist?
East Asia with their caves, like Buddhist caves.
And East Asia, but Southeast Asia. Focus, Southeast Asia. There's temples and Angkor Wat. Ever heard of that in Cambodia? And things like that. So the influence of Hindu temples and Muslim mosque, etc. So it's more architectural design. Neo-Confucianism. What do you affiliate in terms of artistic relations to that one? Bookbinding. Yeah.
Is that the version?
Poems. Lots of poetry during this time.
Considered artistic.
Well, it was, yes and no, because at first it was considered a form of art and fashion, and then later
We
it
learned
was
about
just
that in Spanish class.
What is it?
Last week.
Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I will leave you with this because it is kind of break at this moment. What is the name of the writing, not Kipu, but the actual record keeping that the Toltec and Mexica Aztec will start to use? They're circle little pieces. What are they called?
We learned this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Starts with a C.
Yeah.
Codexes, codices, right? So this is where we start to see the
yeah,
codices.
Oh my god, that's
Right.
Yeah.
And all great math did not start with the Arabs. It actually came from where to the Arabs? India. Decimals and zeros. And we can't forget America had their own zero and system too. But yes, algebra may have come from the Arabs, but the real math comes from the Indians and over to the Arabs. Okay, so we will pick up here tomorrow because we'll talk about, remind me,